Hello, so I decided to tie all the videos together in Of the Golden Gift in one last video. And the main reason I decided to address so many different topics, namely the arts, music, education, politics, religion, and academia, is because I believe it is the same blind loyalty to people in positions of authority within all those realms that causes us to believe in an artificial world and a fake world instead of being able to see reality. I think all of us need to ask ourselves, what percent of our belief system is actually based upon our independent research and our confirmation of the things we believe in and our own empirical research versus being based solely on the fact that somebody in a position of authority somewhere told us to believe it. And if we're honest with ourselves, I think we'll find that a great majority of our beliefs is based upon merely blind loyalty to things we have been told to believe by leaders in positions of power. So where does this total lack of critical thinking come from? An interesting answer to that question is put out there by author Daniel Quinn, who wrote this book, Ishmael. And in his book, he said that you can divide history up into two distinct sets of cultures that he calls the old culture and the young culture. And he said the old culture consisted of leavers, whereas the young culture were takers. And what he meant by that was leavers left the world always in a better place than they entered the world, and while takers would always leave the world in a worse state than they entered the world. Now, the other interesting distinction he made between leavers and takers was that he said takers always had a very strong belief and blind loyalty to a prophet, whereas he said the cultures that were leavers that left the world in a better place, he said you cannot find any instance of these cultures blindly following the words of a prophet that they revere and hold above all others in society. I think we can realize as a society, where our blind loyalty to people in positions of authority comes from. It comes from this prophet culture, first and foremost, when we believe that instead of thinking for ourselves morally what is right and wrong, and what is so wrong about that, right? What is so wrong about determining for ourselves what the proper principles to live by should be? Why do we need other men to tell us how to live, right? That's the one thing that we don't explore enough in religion. Why can't we critically think for ourselves and determine our own morality codes instead of just following what someone else has blindly told us to do? When we look at these prophets, man has reacted in a manner to these prophets that these prophets warned us against, solely to be able to control other men. And yet, we are so blind that we can't even see that. As an example, if you recall from part 5 of this video series, Buddha said, do not believe anything I say just because I say it. Right? And don't follow anything I say just because I say it. You know, he said, test it for yourself, make sure it's good for one and for all, and then incorporate it into your lives. But since Buddha always advocated critical thinking, I would guess that's not too far of a stretch to say that if Buddha were alive today, he would wonder why there are images, these huge images of him in temples everywhere. If you look at, again, the older cultures, say like Native Americans, although, different tribes certainly fought with each other, certainly declared war with each other, never did you really see one tribe completely wipe out the other tribe. So in other words, genocide didn't occur under the older cultures when they didn't have any man, right? Because every prophet's a man. Any man that they just blindly followed everything they said. Now, Native American culture had elders and medicine men that were certainly very respected members of society, for their wisdom, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think to blindly follow another man and what another man says, there's something inherently wrong with that. And such a situation can lead to abuse of power where conditions, where atrocious circumstances like genocide can happen. So under this context, I think that America would be a hugely different country today, and the culture would be hugely different had Native American culture persisted today instead of a taker culture, that overran the Native American culture. And you can certainly say it was a taker culture because it was a culture that destroyed the native culture that existed in the country. If you think about it, it's kind of, America's actually kind of an odd country when today only 2% of Native Americans, still exist in the population. Can you imagine, say, China with only 2% Chinese? Or can you imagine Spain with only 2% Spanish, or Germany with only 2% Germans? I mean, that's in essence is what America is. Now, if you look at Native American culture, I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can learn from it that has been destroyed by the taker culture. Native Americans found the concept of original sin to be just odd. I guess there's no other way of putting it. They found it to be a very, very strange concept because they did not believe that any child was born into sin. They believed that every human that was born as a good person, and that they would have to be corrupted by man, not that they were born corrupt to begin with. And furthermore, they didn't understand a lot of the religious rituals of Christian missionaries that came to them. So, they didn't understand how you can commit a heinous crime and just pray for forgiveness, and then all your sins would be washed away through certain rituals, religious rituals. They said, well, wouldn't that actually encourage more bad behavior? If you can just do something bad, commit a religious ritual to cleanse yourself of the sin and then be forgiven. They said, that doesn't make any sense to us. Why not just have a moral code that you live by where, the first thing you should always think of is doing the right thing and not knowing that you kind of have a religious ritual to fall back on should you do something wrong that will cleanse you of, all your sins. And so I believe the reason why Native Americans resisted the teachings of Christian missionaries so much, even though no matter how many times Christian missionaries told them that they were inherently bad people and needed to be saved, was because most American Indian cultures, they don't have a history of blindly putting all their allegiance towards just one man. And also they had systems that already work quite well for them. So, it's a misconception, even though I was taught when I was a child that Indians were savages. And, if you look at it, like a lot of Indian cultures did not even have jail. So people say, how can you rule morality if you don't punish people? But they didn't understand that the Iroquois definitely had rules and regulations for good behavior and bad behavior. So they just went about it in a different way. If someone committed a crime against society, they were ostracized. And they were ostracized until they basically performed some type of penance or showed remorse and showed sincere remorse for what they were doing, and then they were welcomed back into society. So if they didn't do these things, they would be permanently ostracized from society. So again, I think it's like critical to understand your history and not, the fake history that you're taught in schools, but understand real history, understand, the beauty of older cultures, and the beauty of older cultures as well. It's interesting because even the American colonialists, when they formed their legal system, they took many elements. They basically co-opted many elements of Native American culture that they discovered, when they came to America. But they also took out many of the elements that didn't allow them to abuse power. So for instance, women were revered in Native American culture. So the opinion of women was crucial. These elements that actually have a lot of similarities to the republics, right, versus democracies, right? We see that they are now absent in all modern society today. So I'm not saying that older cultures are perfect, but certainly there's a lot of wisdom that has long been forgotten about these older cultures. Chief Seattle, a famous American Indian chief, said something to the effect that humankind has not woven the web of life, that we are but one thread in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together and all things connect. And I think that's what we've forgotten today. We think that we can inflict misery upon other societies, other human beings through fraud and through deceit and through this empire of illusion that we've created, and that there's going to be zero blowback upon us as a society. So, in today's society especially, we need more truth seekers. And I know that when you speak the truth, there are always going to be people that hate you for speaking the truth. But I'm okay with that, because I've never been afraid of, have never feared death. Even since I was 24 or 25, I can remember, I think I was 25, having the first conversation with a very good friend of mine that was suffering from cancer, and at the time unsure of whether he was going to make it or not. And we talked about how neither one of us feared death at that time. So even from a very young age, I can remember that. And the reason I've never been afraid of death is because I know exactly where my soul is. I haven't sold my soul. And certainly I've had many opportunities to do so, because having worked at one of the biggest banks in America, one of the biggest brokerage houses in America for many, many years, I certainly had many temptations to engage in many behaviors that I would have considered selling my soul. And certainly I saw a lot of my colleagues sell their soul for money and greed when I was there. So I know exactly where my soul is. I know exactly where my heart is. So I have no fear of death in that way. And I also believe, I've heard other entrepreneurs say, and I totally agree with this, that if you don't have any commitment or passion in your life that you're willing to defend with your life, that you are willing to die for, then you really have found nothing to live for yet in your life. And I truly believe that. So that's something, and especially as this financial crisis accelerates, and it will accelerate, and it will get a lot worse than anyone can even fathom at this point, that is even certainly a more critical concept to understand and to really grasp. And I say that because I believe it is finding something that you're so passionate about in life that you're willing to die for it, that will be the key bond and adhesive to society as we face the certain struggles and the certain financial struggles that are in our immediate future over the next 4 or 5 years. And as well, I believe that if more and more of us find something that we are willing to die for, then it allows us to achieve the greatness that is inside all of us, not just one of us, not just two of us, but that's inside all of us. And many times we don't achieve this greatness because of our fear. It's our fear of, and this may sound ironic, but it's actually our fear of finding that thing that we can be so passionate about that we're willing to die for. We're afraid of it. We would just rather go through life like, that proverbial hamster on the wheel, just being a cog in the machine, rather than achieving our greatness. And part of the reason I believe we as a society are afraid of greatness is because of, again, this whole culture in which we want to be told what to do. We want to be told what to believe. So we have to break free of that culture, understand how it operates in order to achieve our greatness. I encourage all of you to find out what you're passionate about, and to seek the truth, and to remove yourself from this artificial world of mind control that we live in. Because once you do that, you will find that everything in life that was difficult, it's not going to become easier overnight, but you'll see a distinct progression where things start becoming easier for you. I guarantee you that.